There comes a moment when the boundary between this world and the next becomes thinner than a whisper, and in that fragile space, everything you thought was important loses its power. The noise of human opinions fades, the weight of earthly pressure disappears, and your soul stands unclothed before eternal truth. In that moment of separation, you realize how temporary your fears truly were, and how permanent the realm of the spirit has always been. The breath you took for granted becomes the most precious thing your body ever carried, yet the spirit inside you becomes weightless and free. You suddenly understand that life is not measured in years, but in awareness, not in possessions, but in alignment, not in status, but in surrender. Time stretches into something unrecognizable as the veil between life and eternity pulls back. In that breathtaking stillness, nothing speaks except truth, and truth speaks with a voice that shakes you at the foundation of your being. It feels like the deepest silence you have ever known and the loudest revelation you have ever encountered. You realize that everything you feared was an illusion, but everything you ignored was eternal. In that divine stillness, there is no confusion, no rush, no pressure to perform, no expectation to impress, and no reason to pretend. You stand in the presence of the one who created breath itself, and suddenly you understand why your soul always longed for something more. It was not achievement you were missing, it was alignment. It was not recognition you were craving, it was divine connection. When you leave the body, you don't take your anxiety, your regrets, or your stories with you. You take only the truth of who you really are beneath every mask and every fear. And when eternity opens, your spirit feels truth with more clarity than your mind ever could while alive. It's as though a curtain is lifted and the entire meaning of your existence is shown in one blazing flash. There is no argument, no debate, no confusion. There is only revelation, and the revelation is so pure, so overwhelming, so absolute, that it changes how you see everything you ever lived through. In that encounter, you do not feel judged. You feel understood in a way the world could never offer. You feel seen beyond your past, beyond your mistakes, beyond your darkest moments, and beyond the inner battles you never spoke about. You sense a love so powerful that it exposes every lie you ever believed about yourself and washes away every chain you thought would bind you forever. It becomes clear that the true prison was never your circumstances, but the beliefs you carried inside. You discover that heaven does not scream, heaven whispers, but the whisper is so powerful it thunders through your soul. The presence of Jesus does not condemn, it illuminates. It reveals not to shame you, but to awaken you. And in that light, you understand that life was never meant to be lived from the outside in, but from the inside out. Everything begins with the spirit, flows into the mind, and finally shapes the body. The revelation given in that sacred moment is not dramatic for entertainment, nor emotional for comfort, nor mystical for mystery's sake. It is truth spoken with such clarity that it pierces through every illusion you carried on earth. You see how small your worries truly were, and how large your purpose has always been. You see how much energy you wasted on battles that had no meaning, and how little attention you gave to the things that mattered eternally. You recognize that fear was nothing more than a shadow cast by an unrenewed mind, and anxiety was a sign that your spirit had been suffocated under the weight of earthly noise. In that moment, eternity teaches you that you were never designed to live disconnected, rushed, or spiritually starved. You were created to live awake, aware, aligned, and empowered. You finally understand that the greatest tragedy is not death. It is living without ever discovering who you truly are in the spirit. It is in that thin space between the final breath and the eternal realm that the voice of Jesus becomes unmistakably clear. It does not echo like human voices. It resonates like truth vibrating through the core of your existence. Every word feels alive. Every whisper feels like fire. And every revelation feels like a mirror that shows the deepest parts of your soul. You realize that the questions you asked on earth were too small, the prayers you prayed were too shallow, and the dreams you carried were too limited. Eternity expands your understanding until you see that the spirit realm is not distant. It is the foundation of everything real. You understand that God was never far. Your awareness was simply distracted. You see that your spirit was always speaking, always reaching, always trying to guide you, but the noise of the world drowned its voice. And in this encounter, you recognize that the true journey of life begins the moment you learn to hear beyond the noise. When the revelation about speaking in tongues was shown, it did not come as a gentle suggestion or a poetic symbol, but as a force of truth that carried the authority of heaven itself. It became clear that this gift was never meant to be mysterious to the believer, but misunderstood by the natural mind. The moment your spirit begins to pray beyond the limits of your language, something within you shifts from weakness to strength. You no longer operate from the level of your fears, but from the frequency of your destiny. You sense an internal fire rising, not from emotion, but from alignment with a power greater than your own understanding. The revelation makes you aware that the gift is not accidental, not random, and not optional for spiritual growth. It is a divine strategy crafted to open doors your intellect cannot even see. It is heaven speaking through you, not for display, but for transformation. In the revelation, it was shown that praying in the Spirit bypasses every wall your mind has built through years of doubt, trauma, or limitation. When you speak in tongues, you override the human tendencies that keep you small, and you activate the spiritual mechanisms that elevate you higher. You no longer pray from fear, you pray from authority. You no longer pray from confusion, you pray from divine clarity. Your spirit begins to untangle knots your mind does not even know exist. Problems that felt heavy lose their weight, and decisions that felt impossible become illuminated. The language of heaven does not speak to your emotions. It speaks to your destiny. It builds a strength in you that the world cannot see, yet it is felt in every choice you make and every battle you overcome. It is an internal architect constructing what your future requires long before you step into it. The revelation highlighted that this spiritual language is not chaos, not noise, and not meaningless expression. It is precision, intention, structure, and divine logic expressed in a form your earthly mind cannot decode. It is like a surgeon operating on the deepest parts of your spirit, cutting away doubt, healing hidden wounds, and activating abilities that were dormant. It is heaven's way of granting you access to solutions faster than your intellect can analyze them. It aligns you with the will of God even when you do not know what to pray for. It engages a power inside you that is not fueled by emotion, but by supernatural momentum. The moment you surrender your tongue to the Spirit, your whole being begins to align with divine order. You feel your atmosphere shifting, your thoughts straightening, your spirit strengthening, and your inner world becoming clear. In the encounter, it became undeniable that speaking in tongues is a weapon disguised as worship. It is a shield against spiritual heaviness, a sword against confusion, and a key that unlocks peace in the middle of storms. As you pray in the Spirit, something begins to rise inside you that refuses to bow to fear. You sense courage forming like a foundation beneath your feet, making you stand taller even when life tries to push you lower. Your spirit begins to resist the lies that once held you captive. You find yourself growing in boldness without forcing it, growing in clarity without searching for it, and growing in strength without understanding how it came. The language of heaven builds you from the inside out until who you become no longer matches who you once were. It is transformation at the deepest level. The revelation also showed that tongues is the language of alignment, connecting your spirit to the exact frequency of heaven's purpose. When you pray in the Spirit, your desires begin to shift, your thoughts begin to elevate, and your focus becomes purified. The chaos of the world loses its grip, and the voice of God becomes distinct. You begin to hear guidance that your fear once blocked. You start to feel direction that your overthinking once drowned out. You find solutions that logic could not produce. You begin to walk in steps that you never planned but were divinely orchestrated. Speaking in tongues tunes the soul like an instrument until you vibrate in harmony with the life God designed for you to live. It is not emotional, it is structural, it is not random, it is ordered. It was also revealed that praying in tongues strengthens parts of you that no motivational speech, no human wisdom, and no positive thinking can reach. It edifies you at the core, rebuilding the areas that life damaged and awakening the parts of your destiny that fear silenced. When you speak in tongues, you ignite your inner fire, not with effort but with surrender. You awaken the warrior in you, not through struggle but through spiritual alignment. You recover your authority piece by piece, breath by breath, word by word. And as your spirit grows stronger, every area of your life begins to take shape accordingly. This is why the revelation was described not as mystery but as divine technology, an internal system designed by heaven for supernatural advancement. When the revelation finally settled, it became impossible to see tongues as casual or optional. It was shown as a lifeline, a tool, a weapon, a bridge, and a power source. Every time you pray in the Spirit, you are not speaking for the moment. You are shaping your future. You are not babbling nonsense. You are releasing destiny. You are not losing control. You are stepping into divine control. You are not avoiding your battles. You are equipping your spirit to win them. The more you pray in tongues, the more your life begins to reflect the greatness God placed within you. And the more you surrender to this gift, the less the world can pull you into confusion, weakness, or fear. Your daily habits are not just actions. They are agreements you make with your future, and every agreement either strengthens your spirit or drains the power that God placed inside you. You begin to realize that life does not change in the big moments, but in the small ones you repeat every day when no one is watching. The private routines you allow become the architects of your public strength, your spiritual sensitivity, and your emotional stability. Every habit carries a spiritual signature, either pulling you closer to clarity or pushing you deeper into confusion. The decisions you make on quiet mornings or restless nights determine the atmosphere of your mind and the energy of your spirit. Many people pray for breakthrough while practicing habits that break their inner strength. They seek divine direction while living in patterns that disconnect them from their own purpose. Your spirit cannot thrive where your discipline is dying. Your destiny cannot expand where your habits shrink your capacity. In the revelation, it became clear that every habit, whether small or unnoticed, is a seed planted either in the soil of strength or the soil of weakness. There is no neutral action, because everything you do either trains your spirit or trains your flesh. When your habits are aligned with purpose, you feel it in the sharpness of your mind, the calmness of your emotions, and the confidence of your decisions. But when your habits begin to drift, you notice the shift in your energy, your focus, and even the courage required to face your daily battles. Weak habits make you tired in ways sleep cannot fix. They drain your motivation and cloud your inner vision. They weaken your ability to hear the gentle whispers of direction from above. You learn that the greatest danger is not a single bad choice, but the slow decline created by repeated undisciplined moments. There are habits that fill you with spiritual clarity, and there are habits that quietly erode your inner strength. Some habits lift your spirit, awaken your purpose, and bring peace into the hidden corners of your mind. But others leave you feeling empty, restless, and disconnected from the person you know you are called to become. The battle is often invisible, taking place in the smallest decisions. What you focus on, what you entertain, what you run toward, and what you return to when you feel weak. The revelation showed that you cannot pray for destiny and feed habits that numb your spirit. You cannot speak the language of heaven while living in cycles that pull your attention downward. You cannot expect clarity from above while engaging in actions that cloud your own judgment. Every habit either strengthens your discipline or steals it. The revelation emphasized that discipline is not punishment, it is protection. It protects your focus, your energy, your creativity, your discernment, and your spiritual voice. Without discipline, even the strongest calling becomes diluted, and even the brightest potential becomes dim. Lack of discipline does not show up in one big moment. It reveals itself slowly in your patience, your decisions, and the way you handle pressure. A person who loses discipline begins to break down emotionally long before anything breaks in the natural realm. They begin to lose passion for what once inspired them. They start shrinking from opportunities they were once prepared to embrace. They find themselves fleeing from responsibilities they used to carry with strength. Weak habits create a weak atmosphere, and a weak atmosphere creates a weak life. In the encounter, it was shown that your private life is the engine room of your destiny. The world only sees the results of your habits, not the habits themselves. They see the confidence, but not the discipline that built it. They see the clarity, but not the prayers that produced it. They see the spiritual power, but not the nights you wrestled to regain control over your impulses. When your private life is out of alignment, your public progress becomes unstable. You move one step forward and 2 steps back. But when your private habits become refined and strengthened, your entire life begins to rise without force or frustration. You find that your mind becomes sharper, your decisions become clearer, and your spirit becomes more awake. The revelation also made it clear that the habits you tolerate set the limits of your spiritual growth. Your potential is not restricted by your calling, but by your consistency. Many people do not fail because they lack purpose. They fail because they lack patterns. You can have a great destiny, but unreliable habits. You can have a powerful calling, but inconsistent discipline. You can have a brilliant future, but a chaotic daily routine. When you begin to honor the small moments of your day, heaven begins to honor the large dreams in your heart. When you govern your desires, you regain authority over your direction. When you control your impulses, you reclaim the strength that was quietly leaking away. And the greatest revelation was this: mastery over your habits is mastery over your life. The moment you take authority over what you do in private, your entire identity begins to shift. You start to feel stronger, even before the outward changes become visible. You experience a new level of peace, because there is no deeper peace than knowing you are no longer a prisoner to your own patterns. You begin to walk with a different posture, think with a different clarity, and live with a different power. Your habits become your helpers instead of your enemies. Your spirit becomes louder than your impulses. Your purpose becomes stronger than your distractions. And the life you were designed to live finally begins to rise within you, not by accident but by alignment. Self-control is not merely a moral principle. It is a spiritual gateway, a boundary that either protects your destiny or leaves it vulnerable to forces that weaken your mind, body, and inner strength. You begin to realize that every battle in life is first a battle of mastery, a battle of who will rule, your spirit or your impulses. When a person loses control over small habits, they often lose clarity over greater decisions, and their purpose becomes tangled in the noise of unchecked desires. The revelation made it clear that the real danger of certain habits is not just the habit itself, but the erosion of inner authority that follows. When your impulses lead, your purpose follows behind them like a prisoner dragged in chains. But when your spirit leads, your impulses bow and your identity rises. Self-control is not suppression, it is elevation. It is the reclaiming of the throne within your own soul. There is a spiritual weight that comes from living undisciplined, a heaviness that quietly builds until it affects the way you think, the way you pray, and the way you respond to life. The revelation showed that when you give in to repeated impulses, especially the ones you know drain your energy, your emotional resilience weakens. Your focus becomes scattered, your peace becomes fragile, and even small tasks feel overwhelming. It is not because life has gotten heavier, it is because your spirit has gotten quieter. The habit takes more than time. It takes strength. It takes clarity. It takes the fire of determination that once burned in you. Over time, you begin to feel separated from the person you know you are capable of becoming, not because your destiny left you, but because your discipline did. In the spiritual realm, every lack of self-control is like opening a window during a storm. You may not feel the consequences immediately, but slowly the winds of distraction, confusion, and weakness begin to enter your inner world. You lose the sharpness of mind that once helped you make wise decisions. You lose the sensitivity to spiritual things that once guided you with ease. You lose the passion that once made you hunger for a deeper relationship with God. This erosion happens quietly, silently, gradually. One day you look back and realize that the fire you once carried has dimmed, not because God left, but because something else took your attention, your energy, and your authority. This is why self-control is not a restriction. It is protection. When you reclaim discipline, something extraordinary begins to awaken inside you. Your spirit rises like a lion that has been asleep for too long. The fog in your mind lifts. Decisions that once overwhelmed you suddenly feel manageable. Desires that once controlled you begin to lose their grip. You feel a fresh strength inside your body, a new stability in your emotions, and a renewed awareness in your spirit. You begin to walk differently, not arrogantly, but confidently, not proudly, but purposefully. You sense that you are stepping back into the identity heaven wrote over your life before the noise of the world tried to rewrite it. Self-control reconnects you to that original identity, the one untouched by distraction, temptation, and inner battles. The revelation made it clear that the greatest battle is not between good and evil, nor between success and failure, but between the version of you that is driven by purpose and the version of you that is driven by impulse. One leads to clarity, the other leads to confusion. One leads to growth, the other leads to decline. One builds strength, the other drains it. When you choose discipline, you are not choosing difficulty. You are choosing destiny. You are choosing to protect the greatness inside you from being destroyed by momentary desires. You are choosing to enter a life where your spirit leads, your mind stabilizes, and your body follows. There are moments in life where your discipline affects not just your spiritual life, but your emotional and physical well-being. When you regain mastery over your habits, you reclaim energy that was once wasted. You reclaim peace that was once lost. You reclaim creativity that had been buried under layers of distraction. You feel more alive, more awake, more present. You notice that your body responds differently, your mind processes differently, and your emotions settle more easily. When your spirit leads your life, everything within you begins to harmonize. Self-control becomes the conductor of that harmony, aligning every part of your being in the direction of strength and purpose. You begin to understand that discipline is not just something you practice. It is something you become. It transforms your character, shapes your identity, and strengthens your inner foundation. You no longer feel tossed by emotions or trapped by impulses. You become steady, stable, grounded. You feel power rising inside you, not aggressive power, but peaceful power. Not the power to dominate others, but the power to govern yourself. That is true freedom. That is the life you were destined to walk in. That is the strength heaven desires for every person who seeks spiritual growth. And as discipline grows, your relationship with God sharpens. You begin to hear Him more clearly because the noise within you has been silenced. You begin to sense His guidance more easily because the distractions have been removed. You begin to feel His presence more deeply because your spirit has regained its rightful place of leadership. The clarity you had been praying for was not waiting in the heavens. It was waiting in your habits. The peace you had been searching for was not absent. It was suffocated under the weight of undisciplined living. When you restore self-control, you restore spiritual sensitivity. When you restore discipline, you restore destiny. When your spirit leads, everything within you rises into alignment with the life you were born to live.